Shalom, it's your brother PJ, back again with another lesson. And we're just going to do a quick little overview of the information that I've been going over. And just a little breakdown, because we got a lot of people that really don't understand the meaning of last names, and they've been told something, just like a lot of so-called black people in America, just because they have a certain last name, they think it's a slave last name. So they don't think their name is really the last name of their ancestors, or that's a name that they've been carrying for a long time. And a lot of times that's a false claim, because you can look up these names, and a lot of these names have an origin to it. They have origin to it, so I'm gonna get into it. So specifically in northern England, in Scotland, the Bisset, and that's spelled B-I-S-S-E-T-T. That name is becoming of people of a brown or dark complexion man when you get to the meaning of this, and this is what a lot of these words is. Bisset is a Scottish last name, so when you see a lot of people with Bisset or Bizet, that last name, that's a dark skinned name, that's a Scottish last name. It comes from the old French. Just like another name that you'll see a lot of names. This name is just like the name Swartz, and it's spelled multiple ways. Like you'll see Swartz like S-W-A-R-T, or you might see Swartz like S-W-A-R-T-Z, and those are all dark-skinned people's name. Or you might see Moore, that's the same area. Moore is spelled M-O-H-R, and all of these different spellings that you know these originate from dark-skinned people that came from Scotland and England. And I got a post on this where I got all the sources where you can find this information, because it's all public information. Just like the Irish, we're gonna get into the Irish, because a lot of people they don't understand that like I was telling you earlier in my last video, the Irish slave trade, when they were doing the Irish slave trade, it was because the tribes that were approaching the native inhabitants of Ireland, that were kicking the original inhabitants of Ireland out, like the people of the Galloway tribe. These are all dark-skinned people because of these names. They carry these names, and when they sent them to places like the Caribbean, South Carolina, North Carolina. And if you understand this, in the beginning, in the 1600s, this was nothing but dark-skinned people getting sent down there. Then in the 1800s, that's when you had an uptick in white slavery, because that is a thing. White slavery was a thing from the 1700s to the 1800s. It was a very big thing. They don't talk about that either. But just to get back to what I was talking about. So some more Irish names that pertain to swarthy or dark people: Dolan, Doody, Dow, Dowd, Dude, Drummy or Drummond, Duffin, Kearns or Kearns, and one could be spelled with a K-E-A-R-N-S or K-E-R-N-S. These are all melanated or dark-skinned people names. And just like you have Kenneth the Dub, so that last name Dub or Dunn, Do, Dow, all that means Melis or black. Even the Russians, they had their own version of what they called dark-skinned people that were the original people of Russia. They called them Chernoff, which is spelled C-H-E-R-N-O-F. And in Czechoslovakia, they also had Cherny, Carney, or Duggan, or Duff, or Dunn, or Doon, or Kerwin, or Kalwan. And all these names meant dark Irishmen. See what I'm saying? And this is history, and I go back to the source. These all sourced up. And just like another last name, Macduff. This is a common Gaelic name. Macduff, the son of a black name. And all these names, they refer to the royal people of Scotland and Ireland. And all these people were enslaved and, sent to the Caribbean. And some of this is not what you think chattel slavery. Some of this could be what we call today indentured slavery. Basically like you working a job for 7 years. A lot of people don't talk about that type of slavery either. In 1 sec, I'm gonna scroll down in my notes because it's another thing I want to talk about. And another last name is Dougal. That's a Duff and Dowd. Like I said, McDuff. You got Duns, Cars, Dogs, Duns, Browns. That's my last name. Grays, Blacks. All these color names, and you see them when they refer to like black or tawny ancestors. So this is the name of a Dunn or a Gloss or a Douglas. They literally mean black, swarthy, that of a Murray, which is a kindred form of a Moor, which is M-O-R-E or with 2 O's. These names are such kindreds are directly from the Moors, like I was telling you. You have the Moors and you have the black indigenous population that was dwelling in Europe for over 700 years together. Then you had the influx of white people coming from Russia, Siberia, because that's where they originated from. That's where they came from first. We'll tap into that in another video later. And you had a lot of black swarthy people in that area speaking properly. And they called them the Black Douglases. They called it speaking Douglas. Scroll down. Like I said, so a lot of blacks in the United States, they've been, configured, associated an adjective or a color with the race and their surname with the slave name, so this is we're taught backwards. Thereby you cutting yourself off from history that how your forefather arrived in the U.S. They just want to tell everybody that every black person was a slave, and that's definitely not the case. When I've shown you plenty of facts and evidence, but you have people refuting this, because if they can make us just slaves, then everybody else ain't slaves. Nobody don't want to be a slave. It ruins your history. And all so-called blacks in the U.S. have a surname. But how many of them actually researched and, looked into it? This is why I talk about genealogy. This is why genealogy is important. Because some cases, yeah, you did get that last name from the slave master. But other cases, man, you might have had that last name for forever. It just depends on which last name. You got to look into this. We're always attached to that black African slave narrative, which we got to get out of that. We got to get out of it. Even married, even like, I'll show you like a lot of the pictures of the seals. And a lot of the seals, when you see them, you'll look at them, and a lot of white people, they'll be like, oh man, they just had these crests and these seals of black people on there. But I'm saying, if these are so-called white people, so-called pale people, so-called, lighter skinned people, why would they have dark skinned people, woolly hair as their family crest with the name on it? So these people are obviously dark skinned. I post pictures of all these crests because there's books showing these crests. So I also want to touch into the Irish slavery. We're going to get into this. So a lot of Irish Caribbeans, a lot of people in the Caribbean, they are of Irish descent and of the indigenous descent, because that's where a lot of the Irish people were sent to. They were sent to the Caribbean. The Irish immigration to the Caribbean, it dates back to the 17th century. Following Cromwell's victory in Ireland in 1653, it is estimated that many as 30,000 Catholics were transferred to the West Indies, and some settling in Montserrat. So-called black Irish people accounted for almost 70% of Montserrat's population in late 17th century, thus registering the highest concentration of the Persian Irish ethnicity of any color, any colony in the history of both in the first, second English empires. So just to break this down, I am of Irish descent. That's where my grandmother's last name Brown comes from. One of our ancestors, Thomas Brown, came from Ireland to the Caribbean, and then eventually moved later and got moved up into the Americas from Virginia. Was a Quaker, moved all the way down to North Carolina, owned some slaves, and this was a dark melanated Irishman. And in history, you'll have people that will not tell you this, and so so-called black people are cut off from this because they just heard the slavery. They heard about, they don't hear about indentured slavery. They don't hear about these migrations, why these people got kicked out, why this stuff was really happening. So-called whites accounted for only 2.7% of the Montserrat population. Penal transportation was the relocation of convicted criminals or other persons regarded as undesirable or to distant places, often in the colonies, for a specified term. Later specifically established in penal colonies become their destination. English transported its convicts and political prisoners, as well as prisoners of war, from Scotland, Ireland, and to its overseas colonies in the Americas from the 1610s into the early American Revolution to the 1776, when transportation to America was temporarily suspended by the Criminal Law Act of 1776, while the prisoners may have been released once the sentences were served. They generally did not have the resources to return home. Many offenders thus stayed in the American colonies as free prisoners, as free persons. And this is where you have all these so-called melanated people are free. And they always been free because they were indentured servants. They're not slaves. This is the indoctrination of America. They just want to put everybody of melanated descent as a slave. So that's how you have people in the 1700s, 1600s as they free. They own the slaves because they did their 7 years and they was good and they couldn't go back. So they went and established something here in America, just like some of my ancestors. That's why I have Irish and indigenous descent. A lot of black people have that. Not everybody just ain't gonna be just straight indigenous because we're everywhere. We all got bunched together. We all had our own plot of land. We got bunched together, and our people did what they did. They mixed together based off of color, look, or shit, but not based off of where they really came from. And that's the problem with society today. They look at things based off look or shit, and they don't really take into account history, facts, data, artifacts, DNA. Not fake DNA. I'm talking about DNA they find in the ground, not this bullshit DNA. So, and this is another thing. Get back to the sources. There was a Edinburgh writer, George Hum, at the age of 30, that marked as a black man who was colored would no doubt suit the West Indies. Half of all the white servants in the Chesapeake colonies of Virginia and Maryland died within 5 years of their arrival. Clearly so, whites could not withstand the working under the burning Caribbean sun, and this is a fact. To this day, and you go into the Caribbean, you don't see a lot of white folks because that sun and that temperature down there is very harsh on them. So you got to really think about this. If they saying they sent Irish slaves down there and I gave you the numbers, and they went down there and they've been working, and they said they lived down there, so they didn't have no money, so they couldn't go anywhere. So the only place they would go was stay in Ireland. They would only mix with the indigenous people. So that's why you have the people in the Caribbean, and I'm talking about Jamaica, I'm talking about Cuba, I'm talking about the Bahamas, all these places, Haiti, all these places, Dominican Republic. And when you had these people down there, that's all they could do was mix with those people. A lot of people don't understand the people that conquered this land first were melanated people. So all these people, they were just mixing with melanated people over and over and over. So to get back to it clearly, so whites could not, withstand that sun. So this bunch the lights that indoctrinated the servants from Europe and the Caribbean colonies with so-called whites. Like I said, whites weren't in slavery until the 1800s, and a lot of white slaveries, they were in United States, especially in Louisiana, North Carolina, South Carolina, in the South in the 1800s. If you really want to know when, that's really, and there's books and documentation on that. They never put them in harsh climates like that. So if half of them died in Maryland, imagine how a short time they would last in the Caribbean if they worked in the fields as it claimed. If so, whites could not survive working in the fields during the one crop growing season in the Chesapeake Bay colonies, where the highest UV radiation is the same as the lowest UV radiation in the Caribbean. Then they would have stood no chance surviving the Barbados, Jamaica, Montserrat, which has a year-round crop growing season, so they would have to work year-round. I give you documentation on that, on Irish slavery, and a lot of people don't understand that. Old Celtic people. So another thing, and this is part of my tribe, this is called the tribes of Galloway. And I'll get into some of the last names, and they might not all pertain to these last names, because you got to think, once our people got over here, they might have changed up the spelling or switched it up a little bit. They always do that. So Anthony, Brown with the N and with an E at the end, Boykin, Blake, Darcy, Dean, Font, French, Joyce, Kerwin, Lynch, Martin, Morris, Skirrett. A lot of these last names, if you look at them, dark-skinned people had these names. So-called black people had these names. These are the tribes of Galloway. These are and I get into the history. These are the 14 ancient families of the Galloway. The tribes of Galloway is a term coined by the Cromwellian forces that were merchant families who effectively ran the town of Galloway from the 15th to the 17th centuries. The 14 families were mainly English and Welsh origin, partially of the original Anglo-Norman settlement, and with the Kerwins and the Dancys in the Gaelic origin. See what I'm saying? These were the original people that settled in Ireland. They had been there for a very long time. That's why they were dominating the society, and that's what a lot of the lighter skinned people didn't like when they first came in. Located predominantly in the Gaelic area, they gradually became integrated with the Gaelic way of life, adopting the local manners and the customs. The settlers started to play an important role in the establishment and development of the Galloway town, by commission by public of the religious buildings and development and trade and networks. The families prospered through trade with the Gaelic, hinterland, Europe, and later the Americas. They were involved in all aspects of society, from the governance and administration of towns, church affairs. These were wealthy merchants that built up many grand houses and elaborate furnishings, fittings, and the town that was fortified and the house survived. Blake's Castle, built in the 1400s, and Lynch Castles, built in the 1500s. Prosperity ended with the Cromwellian siege. See what I'm saying? This is what I talked about in my video earlier, and when I told you, he went through and destroyed everything, and he went with his army, and they went around taking over everything. So in occupation in 1652, many of the families were ousted out from the town, and the new settlers to the town were primarily allocated with some of the tribe's property. So this is why today, when you go to Ireland, you'll see those same tribes of Galloway, but you might see somebody with a white face claiming it, because they had pushed the original people out, put them in slavery, moved them out, just like I said earlier, and claimed it for themselves. Some of the old families did return and resume trading, but the tribes never regained any of their former status. Just like today, you'll see dark-skinned people and melanated people in Ireland and in these places, but they never did claim the status that they had. And that's just just one breakdown of one clan or one of a few tribes. And this is just to give you an understanding of what happened and what was really going on. Alright, so we're going to get into the ancient Celts and the Vikings. These were black people. The Celts were originally black from Euphoris. 1405 BC claimed that the Celts were blacks or Ethiopians. And see, the same thing like they said in Native Americans. That's why I said they're from the same stock. They look like Ethiopians. The Celts continue to be recognized as blacks and as Tactus. You spell that Tacitus. And who wrote about the black Celts in Picts in 80 AD. The Celts were the mainland of Europe and were called Iberians and Silurs. Although the original Celts were black, over time their name was stolen by the Europeans. The Father O'Growney was discussed by the history of the Celts. It makes it clear that the original Celts were Iberians. The Iberians were probably conquered by the Ligurians, these are lighter-skinned tribes. It is suggested that the Ligurians may be represented by the modern-day Basque of Spain. The Ligurians took the name Celt the Ligurians/Celts conquered by the Gaulish-speaking people, the Gales conquered the Ligurians and pushed them into Spain. It was these Gales who imposed their language on the Iberian and Ligurian Celts, and the Gales were Baganes, according to the father O'Grownie. The Irish and the Welsh are descendants of the Gauls, and these Gauls spoke Gaulish or Gaelic. The Germans conquered the Gaulish or the Gaulish Celts. The Gaulish disappeared around the 4th century AD, and all of the black Celts in Britain were not erased by the Gales. This supported by the Ivory Lady of the York, England. The reconstruction of the face of the Bengal lady of 350 AD indicates that she was black or /African or /Negro. Like I was trying to say, they have these artifacts and they know, so it just proves without a shadow of a doubt. And I put the picture of it up there, but it just proves without a shadow of a doubt that these people have been ruling and dominating this place for a very long time. This woman was rich and indicates that the African type common of the British Isles, she was very highly respected by her white subjects. There is a genetic linguistic evidence that proves that the Celts were black or African people. An examination of the language they spoke by the Basque has a Niger-Congo substratum. CJK Camdon was the founder of the Niger-Congo substratum in Basque. Dr. Campbell Dunn found that the Niger-Congo and the Basque languages share personal pronouns and numerals and verbal items. So he had found out that the Celts and people in the Congo had similar languages, and their language was the same. So he was like, these have to be dark-skinned melanated people. See how these people already have this evidence. They know this. Also, genetic evidence linking the Basque and the Niger-Congo speakers. Both groups have the same haplogroup, and I'll post this document where you can get into this later. I ain't finna talk about all these different haplogroups, but you can look at them. This linguist and genetic evidence supports that the so-called quote-unquote African or Negro origin of the Celts. The original Danes or Vikings were also blacks too. This is made clear by the Olsenberg 8th century Vikings on the Norway sea sledge carving of the black seafarer that populated the region at this time. It is clear that the carving of the 8th century Vikings were different from the blonde and big-bodied folk in the Viking legends. So just like I said, they have the Hollywood version, but the real version was really big black men. I'll get into it later. There's a lot of famous Vikings that they just attribute to being so-called white, but they're really dark-skinned, melanated men. Because all Vikings, these are what the people were. Big black melanated men with big beards, long hair. And we also want to talk about the dark Cheddar man. Y'all know about the dark Cheddar man. But the Europeans make it clear that the earliest Welsh were black, and that they were a small black race that came to Britain from Iberia that were forced off the mainland by whites. It's like I said, they put them in slavery and they forced them off of their original land and took their heritage over. We're going to talk about the dark Cheddar man. Cimmerians, these people were descendants of ancient Atlanteans. And when they say Atlanteans, like I said, America is the old world, and I'm gonna get into video on that later. But America is the old world, and they know this. So when they tap into that word Atlanteans, they talking about Atlantic. They talking about Atlantic Ocean. What's by the Atlantic Ocean? Talking about America. That's where everybody originates from. That's the oldest land with all the most artifacts, the most pyramids, all that. They know this. They like to hide. Though themselves were not unaware of their descent, having evolved by their own efforts. And we will get into this. But they were black-haired and gray by blue eyes. So, you know, they had dark-skinned hair, blue eyes, and they were dark-skinned people. This is the Cheddar man. And they have bones and artifacts talking about this. The recent news about the Cheddar man will come as a no surprise response to the people interested in anthropology or in the event of ancient history. Britons with dark skin and black curly hair have been recorded since the Roman period, and within the early 20th century, folklores such as Margaret Alice Murray and David Meckrith detail stories of the early inhabitants of the British Isles as what it is perhaps more surprising in the reaction to that news. Who are the original inhabitants of Britain? Whether they were indigenous or foreign, or is it usually among barbarians, a little known. Their physical characteristics are various, and from the conclusions be drawn, they were dark complexion of Silures. They were very usually curly hair. The fact that Spain is the opposite shore to them, and are the evidence of Iberians of the former late date crossed over and occupied deep parts. So all this is known. The history of it has been known for a while. These all dark-skinned, melanated people. And I'm not gonna make this video too long because I'm gonna add some more clips to it. But I just wanted to tap into this to let y'all know that they know about this history. They know about this history, and this is something that they're not teaching in the schools. They're not teaching in the schools, and it's something that they don't push on people because. They don't push because it's something that it would empower us, and this is the history that we have to tap into. History we got to get back into. We got to get back in one with, because we out here learning all this whitewash history, and this is geared and set up for us to be indoctrinated. And this is why I'm coming out with this information. This way you have different brothers come out. So this is something we need to hear. And before I close, I just wanted to get on the Black Douglas. And when I talk about the Black Douglas clan, this is also getting into the Black Vikings. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to tap into this a little bit. And all these docs, they're going to be posted on my website, and I have a link to that in the description. So the Douglas clan, the Black Douglas, the good Sir James. So the clan Douglas is an ancient clan and noble house of the Scottish lowlands. The Douglas were one of the Scotland's most powerful families, and certainly the most prominent family in the lowland Scotland during the late Middle Ages, or the medieval ages, or the dark ages. When they say that, they're talking about dark people. Often holding the real power behind the throne, the Stewart kings. And that's when we're talking about King James, the Stewart. The head of the house, the Douglas, held the ties of the Earl Douglas, Earl of the Douglas, the Black Douglases, the later the Earl of the Angus, the Reg Douglas. Their very clan name strictly signifies the black man. The Black Douglas must be at the time have been the term to interchangeable with black man. So Douglas was the same thing as black man. Black Douglas, black man. Whenever you encounter the Black Douglas in history or tradition, you will find he is a black man. The Earls of Douglas, the chiefs clan of Douglas, they were successors claimed to descendant of Sholto Douglas. Sholto Douglas is in English, behold, black or swarthy or colored man, from which these stories go on. He was named Sholto the Douglas. The good Sir James Douglas, also called also the Black Douglas, from swarthy complexion, was Bruce the Greatest, the Captain War of Independence. The good Sir James was the most loyal of all Bruce Knight, and he came from the race of the boasted of the ancient, the Aboriginal blood that bore the surname signified the black man. Although by this time the family of the Douglas had likely enough made more than alliance with whites himself, of the black and the swart complexion, according to Gotskopf 1558 and 1629. So around this time, they had already started mixing in with lighter skin. So this is why they started to look different. This is why you have King George of Germany. He looks kind of like, mixed a little bit, light skin. Thus, although in his high birth, all of the chivalrous qualities attributed to him before rendered him the splendid specimen of a brave, continuous gentleman. Although he died in battle with the Saracens of Spain, he was actually in some degree a Moor or a Saracen himself. And his father, this Moorish blood, had ran in the veins of the chiefs of his house for fully a century of his death. For the Black Douglases of the Linsdale retained the headship of their clan until the year 1455, when they were overthrown and their estates forfeited in the favor of the youngest and the rival branch, Angus, the Red Douglases. Angus is the Red Douglases. This is where you talk about the red people, and this is where you have these two races fighting back and forth. Putting the dark skin in servitude, pushing them out, and then putting them in slavery, putting them to the Caribbean, like I said earlier. He belonged to the oldest sept of his clan that was known to Black Douglases. A term which is proved to be that pertained to black man, signify black man, as already stated. The dusky skin earned him the say of the historian the title of the Black Douglas. So they had a dusky skin. That's another way of describing skin that's look like ours. Brown, bronze, tarnished. That's dark skin. The good Sir James to his friends. He was such a terror to his foes that most troublesome children could at once be hushed into good behavior by a single threat of visiting the dreaded bugbear, the Black Douglas. So they had used him, to kind of scare off people. He was like the boogeyman. And this is just to tap into the history of the Douglas monarch that was ended in 1452. Same time around that same age. You have 1492 dumbed up verses. And you see this in history, and this is a very strange time when they put in act a lot of laws, and they're moving a lot of people to different locations, and they're changing the names of original things and changing the original faces of people and places. That's why people today have a mixed understand of history. When you tell them you from here and there and you look like me or look like any melanated person, they don't understand or grasp that. So that's something that we try to get understanding of, because they don't understand what really happened. All this really happened just in the last 500 years. This migration pattern, all these people getting moved and pushed, servitude, slavery, all this conquering, colony. But my phone about to die. I want to go ahead and close it out. I want everybody to be safe. Y'all be blessed. Shalom. All praise to the Most High. Kahala Yahweh by Hashem. Yahweh Shah. Shalom.